Hey everyone, and welcome to Let's Pod This. This is Andy Moore, and I'm joined by Scott Nelson.
What's up, man?
Hey man, how you feeling?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm a little under the weather today, but we're getting through.
All right, well, a summer cold. There's few things worse than being sick in the summertime.
Dude, I'll tell you what.
98 degrees outside, and you got a fever. That's no good.
And just not, and it means you can't sleep well, and you're tired at work, and so then even when everything else at work is fine, like work still sucks because you don't feel good. So it's just, yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
However, I'm having a great week. I'll say I had three big things happen to me this week in chronological order, not in order of importance.
I was going to say, you better be careful in this one.
Right. So on Monday, it was announced, something I've known for, since last weekend, that I, in addition to Let's Fix This, I am now the executive director of Freedom of Information Oklahoma. This is another nonprofit organization. It's another part-time thing. So I'm not doing this in place of Let's Fix This, if anyone has wondered, nor am I doing it in place of my actual day job that pays my bills. But Freedom of Information Oklahoma, or FOI Oklahoma, FOI, as my wife says, is the state's preeminent, maybe their only organization that that does education, maybe some advocacy that promotes the open records and really just the First Amendment in general. There's an organization like this in every state. This is ours, and their previous director had been there for, I believe, 22 years and was moving on, and so to retirement, and they put out a search, and I was fortunate enough to be named the new director. I know I've talked to you about this already, but I'm really excited because I think that the mission of FOI Oklahoma and the mission of Let's Fix This are complementary.
They dovetail nicely.
They do dovetail nicely. And so I think that will certainly inform what we do over at Let's Fix This. And hopefully what we do here will help inform that. And together, again, we can just try to make Oklahoma a better, more open and transparent state.
Yeah, man, I agree. So first off, congratulations. That's awesome that you got the job. But secondly, yeah, I think that's they're very complementary. The two roles, I think, the two organizations. Yeah. FOI does very important work. I would say there's some advocacy there on the part of journalists and just First Amendment rights and government transparency and education. I think, yeah, it's a vital organization, and I think to have someone like you in that role is going to be beneficial.
Well, thanks. Them. I think they're pretty well known by the journalists and maybe some lawyers and librarians, but not super well known by the public, and I hope to change that. I really think this is an organization that the public can and should get behind, and so stay tuned for that. I won't promote that too much here because I don't want to have too much blurring of the lines there, but
blurred lines.
I forgot about that song.
That was a thing.
But I think, like we said, there's a way for all of us to work together. Secondly, I did get married this week. We were just discussing it.
Indeed.
I'll brag about it. I'm excited.
As you should be.
We eloped. Something I've never, I guess, if people elope multiple times, maybe there's something to be said for that. I've never eloped before. But it was very exciting. And then today I got a new tattoo. That's not near as important as the first two, but I'm excited about that as well.
I mean, I think that they're all big events in their own way.
And no, it was not an I voted sticker tattoo.
That would be cool, though.
However, we do have new T-shirts in our new store on the website.
So have you worn yours out yet?
I wore mine
on non-election day.
Yeah, I wore it yesterday on July 4th. I thought it was very patriotic.
I did the same thing.
Did you really?
I did.
Yeah. So if listeners, if you are interested in having a nice new soft navy blue Let's Fix This I Voted t-shirt, they're available on our website, letsfixthisok.org. Go to the store link there at the menu. I think you can just go to letsfixthisok.org/store. And if you use the code VOTER, you can get $5 off your t-shirt.
And they're awesome. They really are. They're really cool. We both wore them on election day and got lots of compliments.
We did, and I think a lot of folks, they probably didn't notice as much because everyone had on an I voted sticker. So at a distance, you don't know. That's the thing that's beautiful about it. So yeah, $20 you can get them online if you use the code VOTER.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Scott, let's move in to our episode we have any other announcements?
I don't think so. I think that's about all she wrote.
I think so. Oh, one other thing, though. If you haven't yet signed up for one of our Capital Restoration Project tours, there are just a few spots remaining. We have one date later this month in July and one date in August. However, if they happen to fill up, we could add more. So take a look. Again, go to the website, go to the events page, and all the information is there and a link to follow for that.
Awesome.
That's all I have for now.
Very cool, man.
Great.
Shall we get into it?
Let's get into our Don't Miss This
Awesome
segment. You got some news stories for us?
Yeah. So this week it's a little bit of a mix. There's some news, and this week honestly it's a lot of like opinion, a lot of commentary. There's been some stuff going on the last couple of weeks, but I think obviously what we're going to spend the bulk of our time today talking about is the election, and a lot of our articles that we picked this week are also dealing with that. So first up is Arnold Hamilton's got a great article in the Journal Record called "The Next 2 Months Could Be Wild." This is really, it's a fascinating piece, and I suggest everybody read it. It's kind of an election recap / analysis, specifically dealing with the campaign and election night results for Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb. Lieutenant Governor Lamb did not make it into the Republican gubernatorial primary, and this article kind of just delves into his, what was his strategy, what were maybe some factors influencing his performance that night. For me, big takeaways from this are, one, you never know what happens in an election, right? If you didn't learn that in 2016, you know that now, because I think that it would be, I think that anyone who says that Mr. Lamb was not the odds-on favorite to be the next governor of the state of Oklahoma, I think you're misguided if you don't think that was kind of an assumption that a lot of people had, that he was going to run, he'd win the primary, and then he'd win the general election.
I think it was an assumption leading up to the election, but if for those of us who listen to the podcast, they know that you and I cast serious doubt on it,
yes,
as did most other politicos, I think. And the polls did too. And as we know, if you listen to 538 Politics, as Scott and I do, it's more national stuff. In fact, no local stuff for us, but not yet. But they talk about how people misinterpret polls. I guess that's really the gist of it. And so I think this was pretty clear, though. There was no clear front runner.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think that for those of us that were watching the race carefully, you're 100% right. I think a lot of people were not watching the race carefully and just kind of assuming, that this was an inevitability. So that's takeaway number one. Takeaway number two, and this is a point that Mr. Hamilton makes in the piece, is that, yes, while State Question 788, the medical marijuana question, certainly drove turnout, Mr. Hamilton makes the argument that was in fact not the deciding factor, and that if you are going to be running in Oklahoma for any kind of statewide office in particular, and you're not seeing that kind of demographics and the shape of the electorate in Oklahoma is changing, like if you're missing that, you're not paying attention, and that doesn't bode well for your future.
Yeah, and I think it's changing more quickly than even I expected. I don't know about you, but I feel like some of the election results were intriguing. The turnout was great, and given this election was a bit unique because of State Question 788, but I think that even if you look nationally, I think things are shifting maybe in ways that we thought might be possible, but they seem more possible than we anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, one quick fact from this. Do you know, Andy, you actually you're the one person, if I was going to ask somebody, do they know this? You're the one person who might know this. Do you know how many new voter registrations we've had in Oklahoma since January?
Oh, man, I read this and I don't recall. I'll take a stab at it though and say 48,000.
Jesus, 45,000.
Yes.
So I said you're the one person that might know this. So we've had 45,000 new voters registered since January, which is just, I mean, it's awesome. We need to, in my opinion, register about 400,000 more. But that's fantastic. But what that speaks to is that there's a lot of people who have not been engaged in politics in Oklahoma on either side of the aisle for years, and that are trying to be engaged now. Yeah. So that's kind of the second takeaway. And then the third thing that he gets into is kind of making not a lot, but a little bit of prediction about what the race between the two remaining candidates, Oklahoma City Mayor Mick Cornett and Mr. Kevin Stitt, who's a businessman from Tulsa, kind of talking a little about what kind of the contours or the broad outlines of that race might look like. So it's a great piece. It's really interesting, particularly for a political junkie. So I would encourage everybody to check it out.
Yeah. One thing, I don't know if they address this in the article because I haven't read all of it yet, but even so, as great as turnout was, and this will be my little moment of poo-poo on the election, I was super pumped, right, that the turnout was higher than in the last gubernatorial general election, which I feel like that's a stat that is important, but also it's like one of those sports stats. Like, this is the team is great on third downs that follow second downs where they gained at least 7 yards and they're heading west, or what? And you're like, that stat means nothing. So,
right.
So based on the last election 4 years ago for governor, that's a good deal. I don't know how it compares to previous gubernatorial elections. I didn't look at that. And even though turnout was so high this time, it was very, very low 4 years ago. And still, we had 800 and something thousand people vote this time. There's over 2 million registered voters in Oklahoma. Yeah. So we still had less than half, more than a third, but less than a half.
Show up and go to the polls.
Actually go to the polls. And so, great job, everyone who went. Next time, bring a friend.
Yep.
And I'm nervous, I will say, that without a marijuana question on the general election in November, turnout might dip, right? It might be low again.
I have thoughts on that. We're going to come back to that.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, that's our next segment. I mean, I guess we could do it now, but...
Yeah, we'll come back to it.
All right.
Stay tuned, listeners.
Next up, we've got from the Tahlequah Daily Press by Mr. Sean Rowley. Lawmakers weigh in on primary results. This is from about a week ago. I thought it was really just an interesting article, kind of a nice summary of election results, but particularly from the standpoint of two lawmakers who represent largely rural districts, one from each party. So State Rep Matt Meredith, who's a Democrat from Tahlequah, and the other lawmaker is State Representative Dwayne Pemberton, who's a Republican from Muskogee, kind of talking about the things that they thought drove turnout. They are also agreeing, definitely there was medicinal marijuana was not a small thing, but Mr. Pemberton makes the point of saying, hey, don't forget about education. He specifically references some of the Oklahoma Platform caucus members who, did not fare well in the elections on this past Tuesday, who didn't vote for House Bill 1010XX, which was the teacher pay raise bill. So they just kind of really, they get into what was driving turnout this election, how they think, why people voted the way they did in their districts, and then they also kind of do some prognosticating about what the gubernatorial election specifically is going to look like. Mm-hmm. So, great article. Grab it at the Tahlequah Daily Press. Check it out. Next up, this next one may be the single most important kind of news-y article for you to read this week. And this is from Ben Felder at the Oklahoman. It's called Schools Plagued by Low Funding as Student Needs Increase. This is a little bit longer piece than sometimes we see on the Oklahoman website, but it's absolutely fantastic. Talking about just the difficulties that schools in Oklahoma face, and the difficulties that their students face in terms of poverty, lack of adequate nutrition, lack of safe home environments, what things that schools can do to try and address those things, and really highlights the, I think one of the dilemmas that we face in education in Oklahoma generally, but that's an issue in education all across the country, which is, I think there's a legitimate debate to be had about what role, I think people get into debates about what role do schools play in providing free lunch? What role do schools play in breakfast and kind of meeting these other needs? The purpose of school is for school, and, is it really the school's business to address some of those other things? And I think the school, oftentimes their answer is, well, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But if kids can't learn because they're hungry, right? If they can't pay attention because they don't get adequate sleep, because they're not safe at home, if there's all these other factors that are inhibiting our ability to educate our kids, doesn't it fall onto the school to take on those things as part of their education mandate? Mm-hmm. I think largely the answer to that question has been yes, but if schools are going to do that, then it requires significant resources. And that's really what Ben's article is dealing with, is that despite the progress that has, unquestionably been made in funding education in Oklahoma in the last 4 months, we're still behind the curve. Like, we're still not where I think we need to be for schools to be doing all the things that we as a society have said we expect them to do.
Right. And maybe a bit of a soapbox here. So as we've said numerous times, education funding in our state has been cut tremendously over the last 10 years. Now, I know from being at the Capitol during the walkout, there were a lot of people who were there and they were mad and they were up in arms. And the thing they're mad about is that, even though they may have voted to raise teacher pay and to raise the increases in education funding, they were still mad. Like, well, they cut it for 10 years. It's like, and I want to implore everyone, when someone says they cut it, to ask who they are and ask them specifically, like, their legislators. Because if you're someone who's saying, well, they cut it, and you're like, well, who's your legislator? And it's, I don't know, like Forrest Bennett, who's been there for one term, right? Or anyone else who's been there for just a couple of years. Well, Forrest probably didn't vote to cut it. And also, like, they haven't been there very long. So a lot of the cuts were in years past. And as we move past this coming November election, when we'll have almost 3/4 at least of the legislature will have been there for less than 4 years, right? They who cut it have long since gone, and we have new people there who may have just voted to do the right thing for their first opportunity, right? And so I think, while yes, we certainly do have a long way to go. So we didn't have cuts this year. We did get a bump. It is not back to where it was 10 years ago. But to get back to where we were, it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of time. We didn't, if you dig a hole, it takes a while to fill it back in, I guess.
Right. Well, and this is kind of, this is something that you and I went back. I don't want to say we went back and forth because it makes it sound like we were arguing and we were in fact on the same page, but something you and I went round and roundabout with each other and then with people we would talk to during the walkout. Everybody's saying fully fund education, fully fund education, fully fund education. It's like,
what does fully fund mean?
Yeah, like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean getting back to pre-recession 2008, 2009 levels? Because if that's what you mean when you say fully fund it, then you're making the case that at those levels, education funding was adequate. And there's people who are really involved in this issue who would say that they weren't even adequate then. So, like what does that mean? And this is what's hard, I think, about what we do, which is trying to get people to be engaged and advocate for the things that they want. To answer the question, either from us or from your lawmaker or whoever is posing it to you, what does it mean to fully fund education? That requires you, I think, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, to get into the weeds a little bit, right? Like we as society, I know that not everybody has to go get a master's in public policy, right? You don't have to go get your degree in education or work in a school. Like, you don't have to do those things to have an educated opinion on what funding schools in Oklahoma should look like.
Right.
But you do have to go beyond, I just think schools need more money.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we can't all be experts in everything.
No.
And neither you nor I have masters in public administration. We're really just started this as two guys who kind of pay attention. We may have other expertise that are even far surpass our political knowledge, because I feel like I'd learn stuff every week.
Oh, constantly.
But I get that it's not a hobby for everybody. In fact, I was getting tattooed today. I was talking to the tattoo artist about it, and I said, I don't know if you're political or not, but Scott Pruitt just resigned. And she was like, I'm not political at all, but that's interesting. Which I don't know if she, how much more she really even knew who he was or what he does, that kind of thing. But it did give me an opportunity to evangelize about let's fix this to her, and gave her one of my cards. But and she said, I feel like I should know more about this because I don't know hardly anything, and I know a lot of folks feel that way. In fact, most people that come to Let's Fix This events, every time at the Capitol, half the crowd is brand new, has never been there before, and that blows me away every time. And it's great. Like, come on, just bring a friend next time. Don't just because you came once doesn't mean it's over. Just like, if we really want to fix this, you got to do more than just vote.
Right.
And And so voting, you got to vote.
Right.
For
If
sure.
you're not voting, then that is definitely the place to start.
Let's start there, because if you don't vote and you just come and talk, it doesn't may not mean as much. So let's vote. That's easy to do. You can even vote by mail. You don't even have to go to the polls if you don't like people. That's super easy to do as well. But then you got to do more than that too. At least make phone calls, send emails. Ideally, leave your house if you can and talk to elected official.
100%. So that is Ben's article from News OK, Schools Plagued by Low Funding as Student Needs Increase. Everybody make sure that you check that out for sure. And then almost as like a follow-up to that, this is from a blog post from Education Week that came up actually the day after the election. Waves of teachers surging ahead in Oklahoma legislative races. So we had 67 teachers running for office this year in Oklahoma. 35 of them survived the primary, either winning their election or advancing to a runoff, which is, I mean, that's pretty solid, man. That's more than
nothing.
That's more than 50%, and
it's more than we had 2 years ago at the last teacher wave.
Kind of like the teacher caucus of 2016. A lot of educators ran in 2016 and did not have much success. And this is, I think this is significant. And Mr. Burnett, who writes this article, Darrell Burnett II, that's a cool name.
It is.
He makes the point that teachers, most of the time, teachers are kind of doing this on a little bit of a shoestring budget, right? Like many teachers don't have the political connections. They don't have the kind of deep pocket connections that a lot of more traditional politicians have. So they're really doing this kind of fueled on, grassroots passion and, $5 donations from people that really believe in them. So to see that degree of success is, I think it's fantastic. It will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how many of them advance to the general election. And then it will be interesting to see how many of them actually win. And if there really is like a significant cohort of teachers in the state legislature, because if there are, and it's important to remember too, that a lot of these teachers are running, they're not like these teachers are running on, they're not all running as Democrats, right? They're running on both sides of the aisle.
Most teachers are Republicans in Oklahoma.
Well, so assuming that several of those people win, it'll be interesting, when you look to be a fly on the wall in the Republican caucus, if the Republican caucus in the House this time next year has 7 teachers in it, right, advocating for increased education funding and the taxes that will come with that.
To be devil's advocate for a moment, do you think we could elect too many teachers?
Sure, because I think you can elect too many of everything, right? You don't need a state legislature that's,
entirely teachers,
or entirely doctors, or entirely oil men or women, or CEOs or whatever, right? Like you need like teachers, I think, are absolutely underrepresented in government.
Sure,
but they can be overrepresented as well.
Right.
I don't think we're in danger of that, but I think that
it's also interesting. I don't remember this article, but one of them that I read, it was a report from OEA that said how many, quote, like education candidates there were, or teacher candidates, and they identify teacher candidates as people who are currently teachers, former teachers, or were like children of teachers, or like a spouse of a teacher. It was like a one thing removed. And I thought, okay, well that's different, right? Like there's a lot of folks whose like mother was a teacher, and we may not know if that means public school or homeschool teacher, or that was just
college professor, or like
right. It's not all teachers are created equal.
I mean, hell, I taught for Princeton Review for 5 years, right? Like,
you're not a teacher?
I don't think so, but
not in this sense, right? Right. I mean, I was an adjunct, professor as well for 4 or 5 years. I would not consider myself a teacher if I was running for office. I'm pro education.
Sure.
I'm certainly, that is a soft spot for me, but it's not in the same way as like candidate Sarah Carnes out in Mustang that you and I visited with on election day, who's running for the House seat out there, who is currently a teacher. That's a different story. So
I think it'll also be interesting to see, assuming that we do get a significant increase in representation from teachers, what kind of role do they take now as members of the legislature, either senators or representatives, and really doing the work of getting into the weeds, getting into the nitty-gritty of education policy and funding, but then taking that back to the schools where they've been employed and diving into this with their former colleagues, right? Like, do they go back and talk with their administration? Because that'd be interesting, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it'd be interesting, like, say you're a teacher, you're a third-year teacher teaching, second grade at elementary school, and maybe you and your principal, right, who's your boss, or your administrator in your district, maybe you guys don't see eye to eye on education funding. But now you run for office, and now you're the state legislator who is actually taking these votes and helping craft this policy. I mean, I think that sets up a really different dynamic the next time you go back into a meeting with your administration, either at your school or at the district level.
Right.
Rather than being, I don't mean like just a teacher, but rather kind of having that employer, employee, supervisor, subordinate relationship.
Right.
And I just think it'd be interesting to see what kind of, how that dynamic plays out, and then what kind of education teachers in the legislature are able to provide their colleagues about education funding and policy.
Indeed. And then our last article.
I'm so excited.
I know you are. I saw that Effie Craven tweeted you and I about this today.
Yeah.
This will be our final installment of the DC edition of Pruitt Watch.
It's time. It's time for your weekly dose of Scott Pruitt. But this week is unique. Why? Because you heard it here. You probably didn't hear it first here. You probably have seen it on Twitter.
You heard
already.
it here 11th.
You heard it here 2 days after it happened. Scott Pruitt today, Thursday, July 5th, tendered his resignation to President Donald Trump, effective July the 6th, as administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency.
That's right. You and I were planning a Pruitt Watch anyway, because several things have happened in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And then in the midst of us tweeting about it, then it dropped that he resigned.
Yes. And, I mean...
Would you like me to read his resignation letter?
Will you actually?
I will.
Yes.
I don't know his accent. I'm just going to read it in my own voice. That way it's less inflammatory. Mr. President, it's been an honor to serve you as the cabinet... Excuse me. Let me start over. Mr. President, it has been an honor to serve you in the cabinet as administrator of the EPA. Truly, your confidence in me has blessed me personally and enabled me to advance your agenda beyond what anyone anticipated at the beginning of your administration. Your courage, steadfastness, and resolute commitment to get results for the American people, both with regard to improved environmental outcomes as well as historical regulatory reform, is in fact occurring at an unprecedented pace, and I thank you for the opportunity to serve you and the American people in helping achieve those ends. Quick aside, this sounds like Trump wrote it.
It really does.
Maybe that's why they're friends. They speak the same language. That is why it's hard for me to advise you. I am stepping down as administrator of the EPA effective as of July 6th. It is extremely difficult for me to cease serving you in this role because I count it as a blessing to be serving you in any capacity, but also because of the transformative work that is occurring. However, the unrelenting attacks on me personally, my family, are unprecedented and have taken a sizable toll on all of us. My desire is in service to you, as always, has always been to bless you as you make important decisions for the American people. I believe you are serving as president today because of God's providence. I believe that same providence brought me into your service. I pray as I have served you that I have blessed you and enabled you to effectively lead the American people. Thank you again, Mr. President, for the honor of serving you, and I wish you Godspeed in all that you put your hand to. Your faithful friend, Scott Pruitt. That's... I will say this.
Do you feel dirty after reading that?
I don't. I'll be honest. On the presumption that Scott Pruitt himself wrote this letter with his own hand, it's kind of a sweet letter. It's a bit of a love letter to the president, and I'll be honest, like, let's say you were EPA administrator and there was a different president, right? I know you're a big fan of Obama. If you had been EPA administrator for Obama and you had to resign for whatever reason, I would think...
I would not write that letter.
Maybe not these same words. You would probably do a more succinct, like, I'm resigning, blah, blah, blah. Less personal touch. But I read this as Pruitt being someone who is deeply committed to the president. he was also deeply committed to lots of bizarre things.
Yes.
And scandals upon scandals.
Here's the thing about that letter. That letter crystallizes everything that bothers me about Scott Pruitt as a politician. And I want to be really clear that I'm saying everything that bothers me about Scott Pruitt as a politician. Okay?
That's a very well articulated sentence.
Because here's the thing. I don't know Scott Pruitt personally. I have no idea what kind of a human being he is, right? I have my guesses, but I've never met the man, but I mean, I'm resigned, personal attacks on me and my family. Do you think Scott Pruitt knows how many federal investigations he's under right now?
14?
19.
19.
He has 19 professional investigations. He has more active investigations than months in office.
That's impressive.
Right?
That is empirically impressive.
His average comes out to 1.1 investigations a month. New investigations.
Well, it felt like, so as someone who's a manager I have a staff of about 25 people at my job, and I've been there for 9 years. And during that time, I've had a number of employees who I had to terminate, right? Terminate their employment. And many of those that it's happened, it was people who I couldn't finish cleaning up the mess that they made on one day before something else happened.
Right.
I'm in HR's office talking okay, well, they sent this email and said this bizarre thing, and then they did this, and then while I'm there, I get an email that something else happened. I'm I haven't even finished punishing you for the last thing you did. And I feel like that's kind of what's been happening with Pruitt, is that something's not even resolved yet,
and there's something else,
and then it's
and weird stuff.
Well,
right?
It's weird stuff that is also possibly illegal, right?
Yes.
Him wanting him wanting a specific brand of lotion that is only sold in certain hotels.
The scrubbing of his calendar,
right?
When you're a public, when you're a official at that level,
right.
Your calendar, it's a presidential record,
open record,
that is an official
right.
government document, and his staff was actively hiding and removing things from his calendar to avoid public scrutiny
right.
at his direction,
right? And so that is maybe clearly illegal. The thing about the lotion and the mattress, those seem weird, but the fact that how it happened and the staff that he used to do it was very likely a violation of power ethics or something, and the investigations were ongoing. So the fact that he wanted some weird brand of lotion, fine, use whatever lotion you want, but
right.
don't send another government employee out to go do it, and don't make them spend their own money on it. Just
right.
weird stuff like that.
Right. Well, and and so
you don't need a soundproof booth.
Right. So there's
with a biometric lock.
There's the illegality, the questionable ethics of, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but the questionable ethics of any number of things that he's done, the questionable legality of any number of things he's done, but just going back to the resignation letter, the personal attack, okay? Saying that people telling you that they don't like what you're doing at your job, that's not a personal attack, right? A big story over the weekend, Scott Pruitt was eating dinner somewhere in DC, and a lady with her child walks up to him and basically says, how do you sleep at night? What you're doing as EPA administrator with respect to our environment. I want someone at my EPA who believes in climate change, who's working to leave this planet in better shape for my kids than it was left to me. And articulated these reasons why she said, I think you're doing a bad job and I think you should resign. That may be unpleasant, it may be uncomfortable, but it's not a personal attack. It's not threatening. And I don't know exactly what Scott Pruitt was doing in 2008 and 2009 when Democrats all across the country were being harassed at town halls about voting on Obamacare, but I would wager that if Mr. Pruitt was questioned about people yelling at their congressmen and yelling at their senators about voting on Obamacare, his answer would have been something like, well, people have a right to make known to public officials what their stances on policy are. And if, your state representative or you're a congressman or your senator is taking a stance that you disagree with, it's your right to express that to them.
Right.
I bet that's what he would say. I bet he would say that way that it wasn't a personal attack.
That's yeah.
And I'm not here saying that lady did the right thing. I'm not here saying it's what I would have done. I'm not saying it's the best way to handle it, right? I don't know that accomplishes anything other than, you know, kind of providing fodder for like the whole persecution narrative.
Right.
But like, just, you're under 19 federal investigations. Can we please drop this charade about all these personal and unprecedented attacks against me and my family?
Right.
That's number one. And then number two,
something unprecedented. Abraham Lincoln was shot in the head while he's at the theater.
There you go. So, right. So there's that's the first thing. The other thing about this letter that really, really bothers me, and I hate it when any politician on any side of the aisle does this. You don't get to like it. You don't get to invoke God, like, and claim that you have some freaking divine mandate for what you're doing in this country, right? Like, I guess you can. I mean, I guess, you know, it's a free country. You can claim whatever you want, but like, we have elections in this country, and if you believe that Donald Trump won the election because of like God's providence, I guess that's your. I mean, not I guess that is in fact your right to believe that.
Yeah.
But when you are a public official and you inject that into the debate, right? You are claiming, in my opinion, that your actions, the power with which you are exercising your office, is not derived from the people who put you there. It's derived from something else, and that something else is what you're ultimately answerable to.
Well,
And to me, the reason that I get on such a is because that is dangerous. Because people, Christians, people of all religions, all over the world, throughout history, have done terrible things in the name of their God and their belief. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that religion is bad. It doesn't mean that it's evil. I consider myself a very religious and spiritual person. It's something that's very deeply important and deeply personal to me. Mm-hmm. And it's important enough to me that to hear it kind of laid out like this in this resignation letter, it cheapens it. Yeah. Like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
and I think you're not alone in feeling that way, right? Like, there's a lot of Christians in particular who may disagree.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like, they can just, but that is what bothers me about Scott Pruitt as a politician, right?
What bothers me is his like very long and well documented pattern of using government resources for personal gain.
Clearly, I mean, obviously that bothers me too, but
especially
I should say, those are the things in this resignation letter that bother me about Scott Pruitt as a politician.
Yeah. So, well,
anyway, so that's Pruitt Watch. As we noted, that's the final installment of the Pruitt Watch DC edition, because
who knows what'll happen next?
You know what, guys? I don't know what he's doing next, but I Google every day. So,
do you have a Google alert set up for Scott Pruitt?
I may or may not have a Google alert set up for Scott Pruitt.
It might melt your computer.
So,
all right.
Anyway, that's it.
Let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and do our next segment. Okay, we're back, and I was going to start by reading a notice of public drawing that I just saw on the State Election Board website. As we've learned, if you just go to that site, you find cool stuff. So the notice reads, a drawing will be held at 10 o'clock a.m. Thursday, July 12th, in the Oklahoma State Election Board's conference room, State Capitol Building, room G28. The drawing will determine the order of political parties and independent candidates on the ballot of the 2018 general election. This drawing is open to the public. Scott, did you know this kind of drawing was a thing?
I confess I had no idea, and I'm like,
check my calendar right now.
Super happy that I know.
Yeah, I'm gonna check my calendar right now and see. It's next Thursday. I might try to take an early lunch and just go hang out for the drawing.
Of course you will.
It sounds interesting.
It does sound interesting.
Also, I'm a big nerd. Okay. So in this next segment, we're going to just do a quick recap of what happened on Election Day. If you tuned in last week, we did our live pod from Okanor. That was a lot of fun, and it was a long episode. Thanks for hanging with us. During that day, Scott and I also collected a bunch of video and some other conversations that I am trying to compile into a kind of a comedians in cars getting coffee. But we're not comedians, and we didn't really get coffee.
We did spend a lot of time in the car, though.
But we drove around a lot. We talked to some voters, some candidates, and just discuss politics. Also, it gives us a way to test some of our equipment for a new feature we're going to have coming up in a few months. But so stay tuned for that. As soon as I had it like a third of the way edited, and then my computer crapped a brick and I lost it all. So we're going to get that out to you soon. But we wanted to discuss what happened during the election. So turnout, as we said earlier, turnout was very high, higher than expected, still less than half overall, just to be clear. And then a few
Gotta
folks...
get that dig in there to the voters.
I do. Well, I want people to understand, like, good job.
How much better we can do.
Well, we can, because I won't be satisfied until everyone turns out to vote.
Hey, man, no disagreement here.
Although if we got like 90%, I'd be pretty damn happy.
I'd be thrilled with anything over 65.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that'd be tremendous.
Like, that'd be a game changer.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of the unexpected outcomes.
So
Senate District 40, perhaps?
Yes. So Senator Irvin Yen of SD40,
the incumbent.
Been there for a long time.
Several years.
Who've been very active in healthcare policy at the legislature. Senator Yen was defeated by Mr. Joe Howell in the Republican primary, who will face the winner. I believe that's one of our runoff races, right? No, Kerry Hicks.
Yeah, Kerry won.
Kerry Hicks won that race outright, so he will face Kerry Hicks in the general election in November. Kerry Hicks, one of the education candidates,
she is a teacher, yes,
running in the election.
Yeah, she bested Danielle Ezel.
Yes.
So Senator Yen, who had been in there,
high-profile incumbent,
and maybe in some regards was a fairly moderate Republican senator. He is a physician, so he is. He authored the texting while driving law. He's obviously pro-vaccine, and he was beat. I believe Joe Howell is an anti-vaxxer.
I don't know that he's anti. I think he is anti-vaccine mandates.
Okay.
Because he's a veterinarian.
Really?
Yeah, he talks a lot about his experience as a healthcare professional. So I think that, yeah. So I don't think he's an anti-vaxxer. I think that he is an anti-compulsory vaxxer. So Senator Yen had authored a bill that did not pass that would have basically ended non-medical exemptions for routine vaccines. So right now in Oklahoma, if you elect not to vaccinate your child, you can say, I have a religious objection or other personal objection to the vaccine. The vaccine will be withheld and your child can still go to public school. Senator Yen's bill would have said that no, if your child's going to attend public school, he or she must have all of the required vaccines, and the only exceptions to that are medical conditions that prevent vaccination.
Right.
So to be clear, it would not have like taken your child from you and given them vaccines without your consent. It just would have said, if you're not going to vaccinate your child, you're committing to homeschooling or finding them a private school.
I thought that was the law anyway.
No, so you can opt out with a religious or a personal exemption.
Okay.
But Senator Yen got a lot of blowback for that. He also got
he got some like super racist.
Yeah. He got a lot of blowback for that. He also got a lot of blowback for supporting, or I should say, not supporting what's called independent practice or full practice authority or autonomous practice for nurse practitioners and physician assistants. He was working pretty hard not to see those bills go. In fact, he had a couple of those bills that he just were assigned to his committee that he didn't allow to be heard.
Didn't hear, right.
So
it's funny. I mean, I feel like because he's one of, maybe the only physician up there.
No, there's like three of them.
Okay, well, one of the only ones. And definitely a go-to for these things.
He's the most high profile of the docs that are there for sure.
And so I think he has been he's been a friend to the medical community in many regards. And so for him to lose, this is a big deal. Also, he's been a friend to social workers, to teachers in many ways. Yeah. I think he tends to vote party line on social issues, a lot of them, but not always. And so this was because he's pretty moderate, I think that means that this seat is somewhat, it is perceived at least as being vulnerable to flip to the Democrats.
Oh, this is one. I mean, I think
maybe the most.
Yeah, I'm not I'm not privy to the inner workings of the leadership of the Democratic Party of Oklahoma, but I mean, I think we know for certain that this may be their top target. Actually,
Yeah.
like they may see this as the most flippable legislative district in the 2018 cycle.
So we'll see what happens there. But yeah,
Yeah.
it was a big deal. So he's already out, basically. So it means someone farther to the right is going to run against a Democrat.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In a district that's known for being pretty moderate.
Yeah. Do you have the notes on any other incumbents that lost?
Let's see here. I mean, Lieutenant Governor Lamb
Right.
was a big one.
Which this is the first time that a sitting lieutenant governor, did not get the nomination to run for governor, and then also it's I think the first, or maybe it's one of the first times. I think it's the first time that a sitting lieutenant governor did not get elected to some other statewide office. They've run for other offices before. So
Yeah. Some other that are relatively high-profile: State Representative Chuck Strom, Representative Strom got a lot of flack this most recent session because he was in charge of the chaplaincy program. So Representative Strom, the chaplaincy program says that lawmakers sign up for a week. I think it's a week at a time. They get to pick the chaplain of the week. One of the representatives picked an imam from a local mosque. Then Senator Strom changed the rules and said, no, you can only pick someone who is the chaplain or a pastor or leader at your place of worship, given that everyone who professes to having a faith in the legislature is Christian. That effectively shut out any other faiths. It was seen as a pretty deliberate swipe against non-Christian clergy. So Representative Strom did not make it out. Representative Scott McEachin, Republican from Tulsa, who is, I believe, one of the Freedom Caucus members who voted against the tax bill for education, he was also defeated in the primary. Representative George Fott, who's a Republican from Muskogee. Representative Fott wasn't beaten. He's in a runoff, though. He also is, I think, a Freedom Caucus member who voted against the education bill. So lot of folks that took a pretty hard line against education did not fare well, which was certainly one of the things I think many people were watching on election night to see kind of what that what that was going to look like. A couple other large turnout numbers just I think that are interesting. So 2018 primary votes cast, 452,194 for the Republicans, which is just a hair less than the number of votes cast in the 2016 general election, the 2016 presidential primary, which was 459,000, so difference about 7. In 2018 Democratic primary votes cast, 395,038, which is 60,000 more than the 2016 presidential primary, and 150,000 more than the 2014 primary.
That's crazy.
It's incredible, actually. Total number of votes cast for the state question were 891,654. Total number of votes in the 2016 presidential primary, 795,765. So about 100,000 more votes on the state question than in the 2016 presidential primary. So I agree with you. Turnout has a way to go, but as primary elections go in Oklahoma, I don't think that it would be an exaggeration to call this, historic. I think that would be appropriate.
I think so.
As we mentioned, we've got several folks that will be in runoffs in the fall. Where's my numbers there? Yeah, so every single statewide office on the Republican side is in a runoff. Governor, lieutenant governor, corporation commissioner, labor commissioner, secretary of state superintendent for higher education, state auditor and inspector, and attorney general. All runoffs.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of runoffs in August.
Yes, August 26th. No, 28th.
Whatever
yes.
that Tuesday
August
is.
28th.
August 28th. And as a bit of a teaser, in case you're wondering, yes, we are in talks with non-doc and some other organizations to do some more debates for some of these runoff seats. The trick for some of them may be getting candidates to agree to do it. In many of the races, someone didn't get the nomination, but they got really close.
Yeah.
And I mean, as an example, for Congressional District 5, Kendra Horn beat Tom. She beat everyone else in the Democratic. This is for the Democratic nomination. She beat everybody else for that, with Tom Guild coming in second, and she got more than double, I think, what he got.
Yeah.
But she didn't get more than 50%. So it's runoff. So I would anticipate. I mean, so Kendra Horn might have less impetus to do a debate because it can only. Well, I mean, I guess it could help her, but I think it's likely that she will get the nomination, and she's been campaigning as if she's running against Russell already.
Yeah.
And so in those kind of situations, it'll be curious to see. There's a lot of folks who, like, one person almost got the nomination, but they got like 48%. And then the next highest is like in the 20s or the 15s. And so they've got to do it again. They got to do the runoff, but the high person may not want to do it.
Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. This was kind of the last thing that I wanted to talk about today, Andy, unless you got something else.
No, go for it.
What's going to happen in August? So we just went through the turnout numbers.
Oh, right.
Right. We've kind of talked about it. Number of our articles in our news roundup today are kind of dealing with factors that were driving turnout in this election. You know, the big one, of course, SQ 788.
Mm-hmm.
We got
which
at least
passed.
Which passed, yeah.
Everyone knows.
But we've got at least one kind of prominent journalist arguing you're kidding yourself if you think that SQ 88 is the only thing that was driving this turnout. And if you kind of go back and start running a conventional politics as usual campaign and ignore changing demographics in the electorate in Oklahoma, you do that at your peril. So my question to you, Andy, how much do we see turnout drop on the runoffs? Do we see turnout drop in the runoffs? Like, what does this election look like on August 28th?
Yeah, I bet. I'll say it. This is my prediction. I will say that turnout in August is 60% of what it was in June.
Okay.
It'll drop by 40%.
Okay. I think that's probably right. I'm going to say 80%.
Okay.
And here's why. Because
it's rare that you're more optimistic than I am.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it's so here's why I say that. So this runoff is unique because this runoff, in many ways, with the number of runoffs that are happening, it's almost like we're doing primary day all over again.
Yeah,
right?
Like
there's so many. I think that people, I think that they do actually. I think I'm choosing to believe, at least for today, that people care more than we think that they do.
I would love for that to be the case.
You know, I don't think that this was all marijuana. I think that it was part of it, for sure. But I think that, one, people showed up and voted. Like, I talked to so many people that voted like, yeah, I hadn't voted in forever, but like, God, that was so easy. Like,
yeah.
So I think people realizing, one, that it didn't take that long.
Mm-hmm.
Two, there are more resources than ever to be informed, right? I mean, we're hosting debates for things like labor commissioner and corporation commissioner, and hundreds of people are coming. Mm-hmm. Like, there is some engagement, and so I think it's going to drop. I don't think it's going to drop as precipitously as we typically would see for a runoff.
I think it'll depend on a few things: how hot it is outside.
Well, true.
The level of election fatigue people have, and also I think everyone's like, "Well, yeah, it's fine. One of these is going to win." And I'm basing this on my own as someone who is a very engaged person. Like, I feel less excited about this now. Check back with me like a week beforehand. I'll probably be all like, "Yeah, it's the election. Let's go do it. Woo! Everyone vote." But I think for most Oklahomans, also, it's right after school starts and people's lives get busier. All those teachers are back to work, and they're not going to take the day off to go vote.
I think a lot of those teachers are going to take the day off to go vote.
They can't all go.
Half of them are running.
Well,
like half of them are in the election.
Fair point. I think more. Yeah, I think they may still vote, but I don't. The thing that worries me is that we're not talking about activism the way that we were during session, right?
We are.
Well, you and I are, but we were back then too, and we have an organization that this is our whole deal. But the public, right? We had all these teachers at the Capitol, and you haven't really heard. I haven't heard people talking about education the same way, besides just like general statements of.
I think that's true, and I think that this is where, listener, if you tuned out for a second, we're grabbing you and pulling you back in.
You're one listener.
Hello. Hello.
Welcome.
Hello, Susie.
I'm listening.
This is where you come in, right? Because I think Andy and I would both say, in fact, I know we both say we're doing everything that we can think of to do. Like we're doing everything that we know how to do and leveraging all the resources that we have at our disposal. But we need you guys. We need you guys to do it too. Like now is when we have to put in the work to get people to register. You have to talk to your friends about how vital it is that they show up and vote in the runoffs. You got to talk to your friends about how vital it is that they stay engaged. You got to talk to your friends about what the issues are. This is like we said on the pod a few weeks ago, this is the off season, right? Like in January, once they're in session, so much of the groundwork about what's going to happen in session
that's true.
happens now.
That's a good
This
point.
is when you're training. So you got to talk to candidates. You got to go. So I don't want to say the person's name on the pod because we haven't asked their permission to do that. But someone in my area is hosting porch parties now, right? She's just inviting, she's inviting people. She doesn't know me. We've never met, but she invited me on Facebook through a mutual friend. Hey, will you come to this porch party?
Did you go?
I was not able to go.
I couldn't go either. Sad.
Yeah, but I'm going to the next one though. To come talk about let's fix this and what we do and how you do it. So, go to those things. 2 Sundays ago, the Sunday before the election, a bunch of people from my church, we got together, we got bagels, we got coffee, and we sat and we went through our entire ballot. And everybody said kind of, here's what I know about this race. Here's what I know about this race. Here's what I know about this candidate. This doesn't have, you can make this an interesting social thing. It doesn't have to be about fighting. It doesn't have to be about arguing. It doesn't have to be about the other side is wrong or the other side for you is Republicans or Democrats. It can just be about, hey, let's all get involved and let our voice be heard. Because I promise, if the 1.2 million people in Oklahoma who are registered to vote but didn't vote this past Tuesday, if they show up in August and November, I promise you that change will happen. It is a guaranteed, it is a scientific fact. But that's what has to happen.
I would love for that to happen.
That's kind of what we're all about here, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I guess that's my soapbox, and that's my hope of what can happen. Now, full disclosure, I will be voting in the runoff. I will be casting a ballot on the 28th, I think, assuming that, yes, I will. I have one race I can vote in. I will be voting absentee. I will not be here on election day.
I won't either.
I will be. You won't be here either?
No, that's what the face I just made. I looked at my calendar and I was like, why am I out that whole... Oh, I'm going to be in Chicago that week.
Oh, I will be in Canada.
All right, well.
Dude, you know what we should do? We should do a remote
Let's
remote phone pod. Are you following Twitter? What's...
Let's let our wives decide on that issue.
Yeah, right. Are you vacation Chicago?
Yeah. My brother-in-law lives in Chicago, and we're going to go visit him as kind of a honeymoon-ish.
Your brother-in-law thing. As of 2 days ago, 3 days ago.
Well, we call each other brother anyway. He's an actor in Chicago.
Nice.
My first time to go.
Is he with one of the companies, with Steppenwolf or Second City, or is he with one of the?
I don't think so.
That doesn't mean he's not a good actor. I just was curious.
Right, yeah. I'm not aware that he is. He has an agent.
Okay. All right. Dude, love me some Chicago. So you got to go. Here's what you got to do. You got to go to Lou Malnati's Pizza, right?
Okay.
Forget, fuck who knows. You don't know.
Illuminati's?
No, just Luminati. So it's Lou Malnati.
Lou Malnati. All right.
Like first name Lou, last name Malnati.
Have you ever eaten at Sam and Ella's Pizza in Tahlequah?
No, but I can see where. Okay, Sam and Ella's Pizza. All right.
Sam and Ella's Pizza is delicious.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Carrie
Yeah,
Underwood worked there.
I'm sure. Yeah, nice. No, dude, you gotta get you some Luminati's for a hot dog, or for some pizza.
Okay.
I mean, Gino's East is acceptable, but Luminati's is better. You're going in August?
Yeah.
What, like the last week of August?
Yeah.
It's probably too late to catch a Cubbies game. No,
Yeah.
I mean they'll be independent, so you can go to Wrigley, get you a Cubbies game.
Chicago dog.
Oh, dude, it's the best.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a whole list of places. Ashley's, other than her parents, the family in Cairo, and then the extended family that's scattered literally in every one of these 50 United States. Most of Ashley's Egyptian family's in Chicago.
Really?
Yeah.
Is there a large Egyptian population in Chicago?
Yes, her family.
It's the Nile of the Midwest, I hear. So.
No, it's there's a fairly big northern Egyptian population there. So
Interesting. Fascinating.
all right, that's it.
All right, everyone. Well, that brings us to the end of the episode. Thanks for joining us. No, this isn't the end. After this, we have another segment. Stand by. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to play 2 phone calls that we had last week on Election Day. The first is with gubernatorial candidate Drew Edmondson. And again, this is a conversation on Election Day. And then also Bryan Dean with the State Election Board. So we'll be right back with those. We're going to play now our phone conversation with gubernatorial candidate Drew Edmondson that we recorded on Election Day on June 26th.
Hey, Andy, how you doing?
Good. Drew, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. I've got you on speakerphone with me and Scott Melson here from my organization.
Hey, Drew, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. Thanks for chatting with us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
We won't take too much of your time. I understand you're on your way to Tulsa now.
We're just rolling into the city limits and going to be waving signs on a busy street here shortly.
I was going to ask, what does primary election day entail for a gubernatorial candidate?
Well, I think it entails a lot of finding things for the candidate to do so he doesn't sit around and go crazy.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Go
I
ahead.
hope it's productive.
Yeah. Well, it's. I think it's been a big campaign for everybody. Do you have a sense of who you might be facing in the general from across the aisle?
Actually, I don't. I thought I did. I thought I had it pretty well handicapped a year ago. But who knows? I think we've got 3 on the other side that are all within the margin of error right now.
Yeah.
I think that's how
close it is.
Yeah, that's what we're hearing from people as well. Is it looks like it could come down to, kind of the 3 candidates that I think most people are talking the most about are, Lieutenant Governor Lamb, Mayor Cornett, and Mr. Stitt seem to be what, are kind of the 3 that it seems like it could come down to. I think it'll be interesting to see, if any one of them can get a majority or if there's going to be a runoff between 2 of them.
Well, I would bet money right now that there's not going to be a majority.
I agree with that.
I would be surprised if anybody gets close to 40%.
Yeah.
Because there are a bunch of other candidates in the race.
Sure.
There's a second tier of Gary Richardson, Gary Jones, and Dan Fisher.
Right.
Any one of whom could have broken through. I don't think it's happening.
Yeah.
And then there's another tier of people that filed at the last minute that, they'll all get 0.5% or 1% or more.
Right.
Sure.
So it's going to be a wrestling match over there.
So, Drew, other than, of course, your race, which you're going to be, is your number 1 priority today, and then kind of seeing who you might face up with in the general, what other races have caught your attention that you're going to be kind of looking for results when you're watching the returns come in tonight?
Well, I'll be looking at the lieutenant governor races on both sides because one of those people running for lieutenant governor I'll be working with.
Sure.
also watching the Attorney General's race on the Republican side, because it's been it came out with this swinging, and it's gone that way all the way through. So,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be surprised, because there is a third candidate in that race. I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't close enough where that ends up in a runoff.
Sure.
That's right. Yeah, we helped, we co-hosted a debate between those three candidates last Saturday, and it was an interesting time, I think, for everybody.
Which is an Eastern curse, by the way.
Right.
Interesting times.
Right.
That's right. So one last question for you. I know that there's been a lot of attention to this race, and certainly the political field across America is different now than it was during our last gubernatorial election. How do you think that's going to impact turnout today?
I think turnout is going to set a record today. I wouldn't be surprised if it sets an all-time record for an off-year election. And we usually have higher turnout in a presidential election year.
Sure.
But I think this is going to be huge, and I think in large part that's driven by the advertising in the governor's race, but also State Question 788. I think it's bringing out a lot of new voters.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, sir. Well, we'll let you get back to your fun in Tulsa. Good luck today.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, now we're back with our last segment of this episode, and this is a phone call that we recorded with Bryan Dean from the State Election Board on Election Day on June 26th. Bryan was gracious enough to take a few minutes to talk with us about what Election Day is like at the State Election Board.
Election Board, this is Bryan.
Hey, Bryan, this is Scott Melson. Is that better?
That's much better.
Oh, beautiful. All right. All right. Well, so I'm here with Andy Moore. He's executive director of Let's Fix This. It's our nonpartisan, nonprofit advocacy organization here in Oklahoma City. We try to get people to just engage with their government. And of course, one of those big things is getting out to vote. And we just had a couple of questions for you.
Sure thing.
So one thing we were asking about, we've seen some of the news reports that indicate that early voting, there was record turnout among both Democrats and Republicans. And that got us wondering, on Election Day, do you guys at the Election Board, do you monitor turnout in real time? Like, are you hearing about turnout numbers from polling places throughout the state, or does that information come in at the end of the day when polls close?
Yeah, we can't monitor, there's no way for us to monitor the numbers real time. Is the way that it works during early voting, the reason we can track that more specifically is that that's done at the county election boards, or in some cases they have a secondary site. But when voters come in, they scan a barcode for each voter that gives that voter a voter credit, and so we're able to quickly know how many of those are entered into the computer. But because on Election Day you vote at your polling places, they don't have any way of connecting to the internet. Obviously our voting machines do not connect to the internet, so that's not something they can. We don't have a way of real time for them to have those voter credits go up to the computers. So they take those poll books back to the county, and over the coming days, and sometimes in the case of large elections it takes them a week or more, they go through and they scan the barcodes next to each of the voters who signed the poll book, and then we have the voters get voter credit. Now obviously we'll also know on election night how many votes were cast, but how many ballots were cast, but there's no way for us to just be able to track it real time. We hear things anecdotally from the counties, and we try to check in with them if we can to just see how things are looking and what they're seeing. But the indications are fairly good. They've had fairly decent for a statewide primary. They've had pretty good activity at the polling places, and so we're certainly hopeful we'll see good turnout this time around.
Sure, and that kind of leads to my next question. What is typical for turnout in a non-presidential primary year?
Well, and you're right. We try to track these things with compare presidential years to presidential years, and compare what we call gubernatorial years to gubernatorial years, and those are the years whenever there's the statewide races, including the governor, on the ballot. And it depends somewhat just on the year. There are a lot of factors that can come into play. In 2014, we had a very poor turnout. It was about 40% of registered voters. It's, in 2010, I think it was closer to 50%, just under 50%. And that would be more of a healthy turnout level than what we saw in 2014. And so, somewhere in that 50% range is not unusual. It's, I think you could call pretty average, and certainly something we would like to be back at that level for sure, rather than what we saw in 2014.
Awesome. Just a couple other things. We know you're obviously got a really busy day today. Candidates are out and about today. Campaign staff are out and about today, trying to encourage people to get to the polls. What are kind of a real just basic overview of what are campaigns and candidates allowed and not allowed to do today as it relates to either being at polling places or getting people to polling places? What are the kind of rules of the road that they need to follow today?
And, well, keep in mind that when it comes to there are certain things that are covered by the Ethics Commission that we don't get into sort of the campaign side of things per se, but we do have rules in place in the election code about how close people can be to a polling place, and electioneering is what we would call it. And that's electioneering is when you are specifically advocating for a particular candidate or issue on the ballot. So, we have a law saying that you can't do electioneering within 300 feet of a ballot box. So, anybody who's holding signs or waving signs around or, trying to convince people to vote for their candidate, they've got to be at least 100 yards away from the ballot box. And that's the big one that we deal with. Also, sometimes people show up and they want to wear their candidates, apparel and things like that. And while you can wear things that aren't specifically in support of a candidate or ballot issue, you can't wear something saying, vote my candidate for governor or say vote yes or no on this specific state question or anything like that.
Interesting. And then the last question I have for you, and this alludes to something you mentioned earlier, certainly without getting into, the politics or what did or didn't happen, there's been a lot of talk at the national level about potential, interference by, non kind of sanctioned or non-U.S. entities in elections. And that's led to, I think, just to a general discussion of election security in the United States. Is there anything you can say to Oklahomans as they're casting their ballots today, just to kind of hear the reasons why you can feel good that your ballot is in good hands, the elections are, safe and reliable, and there's no way for anybody to kind of tamper with any sort of results?
Sure, and this is something that we've had to really address over the last couple of years, and we have to walk a bit of a line here. On the one hand, we need to be clear that there have been, we know that there have been efforts from outside actors to infiltrate voting systems across the country. We are in contact with both our state cybersecurity personnel and with federal Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and other federal agencies involved. And this stuff is being monitored and discussed at the highest levels. We are staying in the loop with all of those people, and we have worked on improvements to our security, as all the states are doing. I think at the same time, when I say we need to strike a balance, we also need to make clear that there are not allegations of votes being tampered with. What has happened in what happened in some states were that there were attempts to infiltrate their voter registration databases, and in some cases, I think there was some information that was retrieved by those outside actors that they were able to retrieve information that should have been private, and we want to protect that information. Oklahoma, we have a very good system in this state. We're one of the largest. We are the largest state that I'm aware of that has the same system statewide. So every county has the same voting machines. The computers they use to tally the results are owned by the state. They are secured computers. They don't plug into the internet. Same with the machines. They have no ability to connect to any sort of outside network, or the only thing they plug into is the wall outlet. That system being the same in every county, that also means that our databases are protected by our state cybersecurity personnel. And in some states different counties might have different systems, and security may vary from one county to another. And I think all the states have worked to improve their security and make sure that people aren't able to infiltrate their systems this year. But we are constantly aware and vigilant about protecting information and making sure that votes are secured. It is, we have a number of security measures in place, and trying to actually alter the results of an election is exceedingly difficult, even in maybe in some of those states that don't have security as quite as good as ours. So I don't think there's any suggestion by any of the folks that have been monitoring the security situation here that anyone's vote's being changed. We make sure everyone's vote gets counted in this state and counted accurately, and that's the way we're going to continue to do things here.
Awesome. That's so good to hear, and I think just, for anybody that would be worried about that, I think that just is helpful to provide them some reassurance about the integrity of the process, because like you said, there's been some questions raised about that in the last couple of years. So, well, Bryan, we really, really appreciate your time. I know this is a super busy day for you, so we'll let you get back to it, but thank you for your time today and coming on with us, and we really appreciate all the work that you guys do at the election board. We, Andy and I think both spend maybe half of your website traffic is just the two of us. We spend.
Considering how much we're getting, I think it's highly doubtful. But we really do appreciate you guys getting the word out, and the way we get better turnout is by getting the message out there to people, making sure they know they can get out and vote. And the polls are open 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and make sure you get out and get your vote in while you can. This is how you get your voice heard in our system.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bryan. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Remember, you can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Fix This OK. Scott is at SC Melson, and Andy is at AndyOKC. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Let's Fix This OK. Our website is letsfixthisok.org, and there you can sign up for our newsletter, read our blog, find resources and details about upcoming events. Our podcast is edited and produced by Scott and me, and Let's Fix This is a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network. Our theme music is generously provided by the Sugar-Free All-Stars. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with their government. We encourage you to get involved in any way that you can, and remember, decisions are made by those who show up.